How's it going, folks? I'm Matt, this is Photosynthetic. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bean. And I'm hoping you recognize today's guest. If you haven't, that tells me that, well, you haven't been watching much in the way of YouTube videos, especially for the great content that we create. And it also tells me that you haven't seen any of my previous episodes like Meet the Grower, because Chad Westport, probably one of the most returning guests we've had here on the channel. Always a pleasure. Chad, welcome back to the show, man. Stoked.
Dude, super stoked on this end too. Thank you for having me back. And it's been a while since we talked, so I've been
Yes.
looking forward to this.
Far too long. I think the last time it was you, Tim, and I were sitting here chatting about stuff. Anyway, so
Plants.
well, yeah, exactly, plants. We're talking about plants, but more specifically today, we're going to be talking about breeding. Chad, of course, has got himself a few different varieties there of fantastic beans available and whatnot. We're going to talk about kind of how he got doing the breeding, sort of his ideas around selection, and all the things. First off, though, for those not familiar, Chad, let's just give me a little bit of the background, how you got into growing to begin with.
Yeah, Chad Westport, and I was a longtime consumer before I actually became a grower.
Yeah, I
And
think we all are.
yeah. Living in the Pacific Northwest, I really never had the need to grow. It's all over this place. But around 2010, 2011 is when I picked up a medical card from the state of Washington. And that was basically a green light to go ahead and try it. And so I said, why not? Let me try my hand at growing some of these plants. And that is really kind of how I got into growing. And then the bug has just, taken over. It grabs hold of you. Here we are.
Oh, I think so. And it's a lot of folks kind of do that journey where they start off, they get growing, and then it's like, well, maybe I'll try breeding. Maybe I'll try combining some plants together. How did that happen for you? I mean, you've been growing for a bit. You started making beans.
Yeah. So it was, it kind of goes back again to the medical days in Washington State versus when we went recreational. So, I just said 2010, 2011. 2012, Washington and Colorado both voted to legalize adult use, but it took a few years before that was actually implemented.
Yeah.
Within that time, I saw medical shops being closed. If you had a med card, you could buy seeds or you could buy clones. This wasn't going to be something that was part of the legal adult market. So, kind of seeing the writing on the wall, and again, not having a huge base of other growers to be like, hey, send me some clones. I was like, I need to make some seeds to ensure my ability to grow in the future. And so it really started out of necessity versus something where I was mad scientist. But I think that's how a lot of people start. It's just like, hey, I want to continue to do this. I need to make some seeds.
Yeah, and some folks, it's like, well, I want to see this line continue. Maybe you got a hold of some rare stuff. You want to cross it onto itself and start kind of trying to bring that in and do all the fun things. So when you start doing selection, then when you're growing your plants and you're like, I feel I want to start combining things. Talk to me about how you go about making that selection. What's your process for finding the best?
Yep. So the best piece of advice is always be familiar with your plants. Grow that plant a number of times. You're going to know what to look for in the offspring, but you're also going to know that you like the effects. You know it's going to work for you. So having that kind of deep background of consumption allows me to really trigger or hone in on a particular plant.
Yeah.
Whether that be, it's usually after the fact because it's the effects that I'm looking for. Um, but really, having all that background allowed me to kind of isolate those winners. And then obviously, there's things like my growing style. I'm in a tent. I like them short, and I don't want something super long flowering because I want to be able to rotate my crops. So that led me to start selecting shorter plants and shorter flowering plants. So that part of the selection was based on personal preference.
Interesting. So the purpose breeding that you're doing is more based around your environment and finding the plants that work well for you, as opposed to maybe looking to get certain effects, certain terpenes, or perhaps for washing, something along those lines.
Yeah, it's kind of all of the above, with the exception of washing. That's something that I'm kind of coming into. I'm really a flower guy, but
Yep.
I know a lot of people that like to wash, and that's always a question breeders will get. How well does it wash?
Yeah.
So now I have people looking at that for me. But ultimately, effects. Again, I started through the med system because I am a medical patient. And I know that if I find the right strain that works for my body, it's going to work for somebody else. We're all different, so one size does not fit all. But I know if I find something that really helps me, it will help with others. And so that is the ultimate goal. That's really the direction. But yes, from there comes the terpenes and the flavors, because again, there's so many options out there today. The THC is there.
Yeah.
So after you're left, what are you left with? It's flavor. It's the experience. I want it to be an enjoyable experience. So yeah, I look at the flavors and the terpenes after that, and then just morphology, the ease of growth.
Makes a lot of sense. So then going off that, let's talk testing because I know that
Mhm.
you're not just a guy who smashes a couple of beans together and throws them out for people to obtain. You're doing all the things and you're doing it pretty correctly too. Talk about that a little bit. What's your process?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like I'm trying to set the example because proper breeding is done in numbers. And by numbers, I don't mean running 100 or 500. I mean 1,000 to 10,000. As a home grower, we can't do that.
No.
So we have to find ways to kind of make up for that. So what I will do as far as like testing is, yeah, this latest run that's going to be dropping soon, I grew out 20 myself and I documented the whole process start to finish. So, there's no hiding when you're kind of almost doing it live. So if something happens, hey world, here's what it is. But
Yep.
that's what you should do.
Yeah.
And then once I was confident with the plant myself, then I go out to other testers because it's still not ready because it's really only been tested in one environment. And I had no issues, but that doesn't mean other people don't. So
Yep.
uh, I randomly selected 50 different people for this run. I sent them all out about 15 beans. I said, hey, plant 10. You keep the other five for yourself later, but at least just plant 10. So I was able to get feedback. And, through that, and I've given away a whole bunch too, but roughly over 500 subjects that I was able to see. And through that, I was able to get percentages of certain things you're going to see, like what kind of phenos, what kind of profiles. I have a a 1 in 10 runt frequency on this run, which is, why I'm giving so many beans in there. But at the same time, it's like, I've tested it. So I can tell you, if you plant 10, you're going to get one run. And then when somebody actually does that, holy cow, so important, like you said, because if people just smash them together, you don't know what you're getting into. And that's
Yeah.
not fair to a medical patient who needs to count on their harvest from the 4 plants they're allotted. So yeah, test it.
Yes, 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 yes. I can't agree with that more. And I think that there's definitely a place for the guys who are just doing the crosses. Like, I'm gonna take this strain, I'm gonna take this strain, I'm gonna put them together and see what happens, and see what people want. I've recently grabbed some stuff from Robinhood, some blue nanas that's coming in an upcoming grow. I'm very excited. But
Nice.
like the point is, I don't know what level those went to and whatnot for testing, but Robinhood, good breeder and whatnot. So I don't have any concerns in that regard. That I've grown his gear before, like the Apple Cup. Recently, got a hold of some frozen bag seeds. Really, really hyped for that, man. You see the pictures on the Instagram, just coated in trichomes. Anyway, I digress. Talk to me about the different strains that you've put together there, Chad. Like, I know we were just before we kind of got in a recording, we were touching on them a little bit. I mean, which one do you feel is your signature? Which one are you most proud of?
So Westport grape juice is like my signature strain. That's not in a seed form. That is not out there, despite a lot of people saying that they have it, like almost daily. I know there's well, not even a handful, less than a handful of people that have it, and they hold it tight. But yeah, so the Westport grape juice is kind of my signature strain. It was a recessive trait from the parents. It produces a nice, like carnival candy grape taste or well smell while it's growing, but as it cures, it turns into like a mature, almost like wine grape or table grape with a little
Ooh.
gas on the exhale. Um, and oh man, it checks the boxes as far as like commercial viability, output, flowering time, um, and the effects work great for me. So that is my kind of like signature strain, and that has been the basis for a lot of what I've been doing because I'm crossing different things to it that I'm familiar with to see what sort of reaction I get. And the two right now is so Nakatomi Plaza and then Chud came out. Chud I'm bringing up because that was the Westport grape juice times an Afghani #1 male. And my point there was I wanted to increase bud density and thickness. I want to bring back the baby arms. So
Yeah.
that's what I was going for with that one. And for all intents and purposes, it worked. It was a good cross. I've had a lot of people grow it outdoors, and there's like they're full grown ass men arms on there, so it worked out. And then the Nakatomi Plaza was something that was a just like flavor. I wanted to go after flavor. The Westport grape juice was the mom, and the dad was it's called Sunday Fun Day, but there's
Okay.
multiple Sunday Fun Days out there. So I usually just say it's a sour tangy times mimosa is the father,
Okay. Okay. That sounds
and that
fantastic.
it's it's one of the stronger ones in my drawer. Honestly, that's when I if I need the like I kind of want to just like knock myself out a little bit, I'll go to that, and it has a nice range of like pleasantly fruity flavors in that one. So.
Right on. Right on. You talked about the Afghani male there. How do you go about selecting male? What are you looking for structure, smell, all that sort of thing? Talk about that.
Yeah, so I look primarily at structure. And males are typically taller. They're, maybe a little bit stretchier. They'll have good, strong branching, but they're usually a little bit taller than the rest. So if I find something, and this is usually how I pick my males, is I think they're female up until the point that until I flower them. Because they're growing with like a nice tight nodal spacing. Everything is looking right. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Flip the flower, and I'm like, it's a male. Stem rub, yes. It's not an end all be all, but
It
there's a
gives a hint.
generic smell. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a generic smell to it. So usually I go off of again just the morphology, but I'm already familiar with like the sisters of it. Like I've grown out the female version of it just to kind of assess like
Okay.
stability of the line. Which also again means that I'm familiar with the flowering time. I don't want to take something with like a 14-week flowering and then try to introduce it because that's going to mess up my schedule. Um, so that's how I go about males. And there is a further way, which some of the, top breeders do. It takes a heck of a long time because it involves reversing the male to actually grow female
I've
flowers.
heard of this, yes.
Yeah. Duke Diamond is a person who has talked to me a lot about that. But he really dives into his males. And what that has led him to is higher predictability when he crosses it to something else. Um, one day I'd love to go there again. If I had the license in the big warehouse, I would probably be doing that, but limited capacity, I've made good selections without it.
This really brings up the next question then. Working with regs, working with femmes, making regs, making femmes, what's
Yeah.
your thoughts there?
So Westport's Posse is my first feminized project, and that is the Westport grape juice reversed. So I self the Westport grape juice with the hopes of getting a spitting image. That's not what I got.
Interesting.
Unfortunately, which a lot of times that is what you get is kind of a spitting image, particularly with a lot of other breeders I've talked to. And we've hypothesized on this again. It could just be the recessiveness of the plant that I actually pulled. It's not expressing those things. But what I found interesting is I'm getting the lineage in there. Like I'm getting the
Right.
separate components of Westport grape juice isolated. I mentioned there's a little bit of a gas on the exhale. It's not in the smell, it's not on the inhale, but it's that little thing that tickles your throat as you exhale. I have a definitive pheno from the Westport Posse all gas, single note, nothing else, all gas.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm like, that's cool. That's where it came from.
That
And the
is, yeah.
morphology, easy to point out because the leaves are almost duck foot. If you have a regular leaf like this, they're all kind of tucked in like
Yeah.
this. I had that repeated. That's kind of a OGKB dominant trait. But yeah, it's cool to see the isolated components of it, even though
That
I
is
didn't
super
get the
cool.
like spitting image. But back to your question. So yeah, that was my first fem project. Regulars is usually what I work with. Males, it's much easier to get pollen and just shake your plant and pollinate everything. So I've always preferred males, but a lot of consumers want femmes, and I understand why. Plant counts.
Yes, plant count makes the selection easier. I mean, I personally, I'm lucky that I've got a fairly decent plant count through my license. So I prefer working with regs. I feel that you get a stronger base genetic when you don't have something feminized. Not that I have any issue with feminized seeds. I grow feminized seeds all the time, but I like the idea of working with the males and the females, and that way too. If you get a male that's really stand out, grab a little pollen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So So, any upcoming collabs that you have going? Anybody that you're working with? Stuff that you want to talk to on that?
I that's an interesting one because I have been working with a person for a couple of years now. But they recently did things that got them canceled. And
It's unfortunate.
I understand why. So I do. um,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, I mean, I do have some collabs going right now, but they're just in the testing phase of my home testing, and then I'm actually starting to give them out to other testers. So once I get more feedback on that, I'll feel a little bit better. Probably maybe talking a little bit more about it. But I'm
Absolutely.
hopefully that may be something towards the end of the year.
Oh, very cool. Well, stuff to look forward to. Well, let's sort of flip that around. Anybody out there that you're looking at, you see up and coming, or maybe one of those top guys is like, I would love to work with this dude.
Yes, that is a wow, that's a big laundry list. There's some rad guys out there, like Sticky Richie and a Smiley's Garden are some people that maybe others haven't heard of. That I like what they're doing, and I've seen the results. I've actually tried some of their stuff myself, so I'm like, you're doing it right. And again, a lot of it boils down to just like philosophy and like lifestyle. It doesn't take too much to make seeds or to put them together these days. When you kind of start with something that's rad and you add something else that's rad, you usually get something rad. But there's people like them that are doing a certain direction. They have a certain goal, and to see them kind of hitting those like check marks along the way is awesome. As far as like a big established breeders, Mean Gene from Mendocino does some incredible stuff. I would love to collab with him one day. And then also, James Loud, he has a tremendous catalog to work with. That'd be fun to dive in.
That's fantastic. And there's so many guys out there that are doing incredible
Yeah.
things. Uh, what about a time when something you worked on didn't quite meet the mark? It fell short of your
Mm-hmm.
expectations. Anything on that?
Yep, yep. And those you don't always hear about. And they happen more often than maybe people will admit if they have high enough standards. So one that immediately comes to mind, and it was in that same Afghani number one crossing. It was the same Afghani number one male. And I put it onto a skunk number one. Skunk number one was decent. It had like a nice rubber tire kind of smell.
Right.
Um, and the Afghani had like the traditional kind of classic hashy, earthy type of thing. But when I put it together and I ran the offspring, like the effects were there. They weren't like knock you down or anything special, but the profile was just, it was a 7 or an 8. And so still good plants. I mean, sexually stable, flowered in the right amount of time, not a huge variation of phenotypes, but a 7 or an 8 wasn't really something I wanted to be like, hey guys, I'm a new kid on the block. This is my best stuff. So
Yeah.
those are the things that I'll give out to people and like patients, people who need to grow plants. It's still a good plant. I mean, a 7 out of 8 is like a 10 or an 11 on the rec scale. But I just didn't want to totally throw that out. So yeah, there are things that if people are doing proper testing and they care maybe about putting the best foot forward, they'll hold stuff back. But you'll always find uses for them anyways. They still grow.
This is very true, very true. Yeah, even if you're just, popping it out to make like a seed sprouted tea or something like that. I've seen
Exactly.
guys do
Yeah.
that. You have a seed run
Yeah.
that goes sideways and always going to be used for that stuff. What about the new guys? Chad, I'm a new grower, I'm a new breeder. What advice would you give me to get started?
First advice again is be familiar with your plant, like
Yeah.
know how it grows, because you'll be able to see the traits in the offspring, you'll be able to grow the offspring better. You're not going to get a good expression and you may miss the winner if you don't grow it right. So fundamentals of growing are very important. Good examples are like some OGs and like chems. If you don't nail it, you might think you got past the wrong thing. They're like, no, that's not really it. But if you like are reading the plants and you're growing it right, it's going to knock your socks off. So yeah, be familiar with your plants and then have fundamentals in growing down. You don't want to breed with sick plants.
That's super solid advice. Understand the fundamentals so that if something goes sideways, you can troubleshoot and really understand what's going on. Because I mean, that's the thing. It's hard to realize that you've reached full potential if you're not getting it to that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So to that point, then, if you're working a line, you're working a line. At what point do you consider that it's gone from being the sum of its parts to something that Chad Westport has produced?
Good, fair question, because that's not something that I really hear talked a lot about. Um, just kind of a consensus and like once you once you change something, once you're able to steer it in a particular direction, that's usually when I would say I could feel comfortable about putting my name on it. A lot of just like of the first time crosses, maybe it's like a F1. I usually just list the two plants that were crossed and then I let you know who the breeders are because you can backtrack it.
Yep.
But if let's say I have something that it took 11 weeks to flower consistently and it was a great plant, and I managed to bring that down to 60 days, even though it still retains the morphology, it retains the profile. That's kind of when I feel I've changed the course of that plant. And then that is usually when you can be like, yeah, it's a Chad Westport strain.
That's very cool. That's very cool. And as we talk about Chad Westport strains, I mean, we touched on the grape juice and Nakatomi Plaza. I don't know if we so much touched on the Chud, but you've got something interesting happening with the posse that's coming up here. It's sort of like a special release. Touch on that.
Yeah, thank you, man. It is. It's a special release because I want to get these out to people. And again, I did the S1 of the Westport grape juice hoping to get identical things, but it gave me the individual components. And that's when I was like, it's Westport's posse. So, it's got all the flavors in there for you. So for the release, again, I want to get it out to people. I'm doing a t-shirt, special t-shirt, Twin Peaks t-shirt. I happen to wear my own stuff.
There you go.
Yeah. So a t-shirt, it's 15 of those femmes, 4 of the new tester femmes, some stickers, $35. Like after I buy the t-shirts, it's $1 a bean, but that's still that doesn't really necessarily pay me for my time, but I'm not losing money. And people are going to get some good genetics. They're going to be able to work with them. Hopefully, they share them, and that's the goal, really. Because I'm fine. My shoes are no holes in them.
There you go. There's going to be links below, guys, just to Chad's Instagram, where you can find out more information about that sort of thing. Of course, Mother YouTube is very, very not good about us talking too in depth about some of the stuff, so we have to be a little bit aloof. But certainly follow up on the Instagram if you want to find more about it. So otherwise, any upcoming project stuff that you want to talk about, or anything else you want to speak to in that regard? I know you're always doing stuff with Future Cannabis Project, and of course your own channel.
Yep, yep. So projects as far as like breeding wise right now, I kind of the past year knocked my library down just to my two main keepers, the Westport grape juice and the Kool-Aid Man. One of the things that I am testing right now and getting prepared to make more beans of is the Westport grape juice reversed onto that Kool-Aid Man, which is an exciting frost monster. I got a few pictures up already.
Nice.
Um, but I did that because I wanted to start searching more. I've been blessed to receive beans from a lot of different breeders out there, and I'm sitting on a lot of like potential gold. And
Yeah.
so my goal is like, don't let them go bad. I'm starting to search through things. So I'm looking for, the next winner. I just did a round of 10 and I pulled one out of there of different varieties. And I pulled one out of there that is just I can't wait to ingest it because it checks the boxes as far as the morphology, the output. It has a eucalyptus, minty. I don't know if you guys had the like scented markers up there,
Yeah.
80s, 90s, Mr. Sketch, the
Very
green
familiar.
marker.
Yes. My
It is
first
the
introduction to
green
huffing.
marker.
So.
Yeah, everybody's was. That was everybody's. But that green marker smell, my brain instantly went to it, and that's not something that I've experienced a lot of. I can't tell you the last time I had like a menthol type effect from it. So that is the one that I've kept from those different 10, and I'm going to continue to run that a few times. It's vigorous. It rooted really quickly, which is another good sign, something breeders should look for. Um, but yeah, that's something I may be working with in the future. It was actually supposed to be a blue cheese. There's nothing blue, there's nothing cheese about it, but I'm happy with what I have.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting kind of how that works sometimes too, because you get somebody who works a line, putting out like F3s, F4s even, and then you get that weird outlier. Has anything like that ever happened to you where you've done a bunch of X running and it's all of a sudden that unicorn steps out from the shadows?
Nothing that is just blown me away. Because when I always think of like that super outlier, I think of things like Freak Show,
Right.
like just something that is so weird you question yourself. Um, I've had some good profiles, but nothing that was just like stood above the other keepers, I
The
guess, for lack
different,
of a
yeah,
better term.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's ultimately what we're always looking for is that extreme outlier, that unicorn that's going to be different than anything else. Fantastic. Chad, any closing thoughts as we kind of start to wrap up here?
Well, yeah, man. Thank you again for the time and for the conversation. I hope people learn more about breeding. I hope they continue to watch this series because you've got a lot of good people lined up and coming that can talk, and spread the word because there is, I mean, there's an art to breeding, but there's also things called like inbreeding depression. There's also interlocking or bottlenecking. There's locking in recessive traits. So if you don't actually have kind of a little bit of a background of what you're doing, you could be doing more harm to the gene pool than good. And so
Yep.
education is important. Talking to the breeders like you are is important. Um, so yeah, that I'm sorry I got distracted. You kind of asked me where to find myself, right?
Well, you
I
know,
was like, oh, shit. I get so passionate about that one because like my brain
absolutely.
just like frizzled because I'm like, I don't want to go super deep or technical because it's hard for me to take those science terms and put them into something simple when it comes to like bottlenecking and
Yeah.
genetic recession and don't breed cookies to cookies. How about that?
Take some lessons from Chad. I mean, he's putting together some fantastic stuff, guys. do your reading, learn what breeding means, what IBL means, what BX means, all that stuff. There's knowledge to be had, and I think going in it blind, I mean, yeah, you could be doing yourself more harm than good. That being said, guys, Chad Westport, if you haven't seen other episodes, I'll link them down below too. We did meet the grower, we found out all about his background, and we even talked about some audio stuff. Otherwise, Chad, always a pleasure having you on the show. Maybe one of these days we'll get to meet up in real life and burn one.
That would be awesome, man. Thank you
Uh,
so much. I
all
appreciate your
right.
time.
Guys, Chad Westport, we out.
Yeah.